History remembers empires for their monuments, their emperors, their triumphal arches carved in marble. But Rome was not built by marble. It was built by men who moved like a single organism across blood-soaked fields, who could turn chaos into geometry, who could transform fear into discipline. When ancient enemies first saw a Roman legion approaching, they did not see warriors charging wildly into battle. They saw something far more terrifying. They saw order. They saw silence. They saw inevitability. Imagine standing on a dusty plain in Gaul in the 1st century BCE, facing what you believe is just another invading army. Across the horizon, shields begin to shimmer in the sun. The ground trembles not from running feet, but from synchronized steps. No screaming, no frenzy, just the rhythmic thud of thousands of soldiers marching as one. That sound alone was psychological warfare. Before swords even clashed, Rome had already begun dismantling the enemy's will. The secret that made Rome unstoppable was not brute strength. It was systems thinking, centuries ahead of its time. The Roman legion was not a mob of fighters. It was a modular war machine. After reforms traditionally associated with figures like Gaius Marius, Rome professionalized its army. Soldiers were no longer temporary citizens fighting for survival. They became career warriors, trained relentlessly, drilled daily, conditioned to respond without hesitation. This shift transformed Rome from a regional power into a force capable of sustained expansion across continents. Each legion functioned like a living architecture. Units were divided into cohorts, centuries, and contubernia, allowing flexibility that most ancient armies lacked. While enemies relied on tribal loyalty or charismatic warlords, Roman command structures ensured continuity even if officers fell in battle. Leadership could collapse elsewhere and armies would crumble. In Rome's case, the structure absorbed shock. Orders flowed downward with mechanical precision. But organization alone does not conquer the known world. What truly separated Rome from its rivals was adaptability. When confronting phalanx formations inherited from the Greek world, Rome adjusted. When facing swift cavalry in the east, Rome restructured. When battling guerrilla tactics in Hispania or Germania, Rome responded with counterinsurgency strategies rather than rigid pride. The Romans were ruthless pragmatists. Tradition mattered less than victory. This mindset became especially evident during campaigns led by figures such as Julius Caesar. In Gaul, Caesar's legions faced numerically superior tribes united under Vercingetorix. At Alesia, Rome did something unthinkable. Instead of retreating when surrounded, they built walls. 2 of them. One facing inward to trap the Gauls, another facing outward to repel reinforcements. It was not merely military engineering. It was psychological dominance. Rome turned siege warfare into an art form so advanced it bordered on obsession. Behind every tactical maneuver was a philosophy that the battlefield was not chaos, but a puzzle. Roman soldiers carried standardized equipment, not just for fighting, but for building. Every night, no matter how exhausted, they constructed fortified camps with trenches and ramparts. This ritual transformed temporary encampments into defensive strongholds. Enemies who attempted surprise attacks often found themselves assaulting miniature fortresses instead of sleeping troops. There was something almost chilling about the Roman relationship with preparation. They rehearsed battle formations endlessly. They practiced constructing bridges under simulated enemy pressure. They drilled shield maneuvers until muscle memory replaced conscious thought. The infamous testudo formation, shields interlocked like a tortoise shell, allowed legions to advance under missile fire with unnerving steadiness. Arrows would rain down, but the formation rarely broke. To opponents, it looked less like men and more like an advancing creature immune to pain. And then there was discipline. Roman military law was brutal. Decimation, the execution of every 10th soldier in a disgraced unit, was rare but unforgettable. The mere possibility reinforced obedience. Rome understood something fundamental about fear. If fear could not be eliminated, it could be redirected. Soldiers feared dishonor and punishment more than the enemy. This combination of engineering, psychology, flexibility, and relentless training forged a war machine unlike anything the ancient world had witnessed. Rome did not simply fight wars. It studied them. It evolved with them. It absorbed lessons written in blood and returned stronger each time. By the time rivals realized they were not fighting an army, but confronting an institution, it was too late. The Mediterranean became Mare Nostrum, our sea, under Roman control. The question is not merely how Rome won battles. The deeper mystery is how they made defeat statistically improbable. And this was only the beginning. If the Roman legion was a machine, then Roman engineering was its nervous system. Steel and discipline won battles, but infrastructure made conquest permanent. Rome understood something many empires failed to grasp. Victory was not achieved when the enemy fled. Victory was achieved when resistance became logistically impossible. Long before satellites and modern supply chains, Rome mastered mobility. Their vast network of roads, stretching from the Italian peninsula to the edges of Britannia and the deserts of the Near East, allowed legions to move with shocking speed. These were not crude dirt paths carved into earth. They were layered constructions of stone and gravel, built to endure centuries. Through territories that would intimidate lesser armies, Roman forces marched in tight formation, arriving faster than enemies believed possible. When tribes in Germania revolted, Rome could redeploy forces with terrifying efficiency. When rebellion sparked in Judea, reinforcements followed paved arteries that connected the empire like veins. This network turned geography from an obstacle into an ally. The battlefield began long before swords crossed. It began in planning rooms and survey lines. During the campaigns of Julius Caesar, engineering reached almost mythic proportions. When he needed to intimidate Germanic tribes beyond the Rhine, he did not negotiate from weakness. He built a bridge across the river in just 10 days, marched his legions across it, demonstrated Roman reach, and then dismantled the bridge. It was a message written in timber and iron. No natural boundary could shield Rome's enemies. Siegecraft became another chilling expression of Roman innovation. At Masada, during the First Jewish-Roman War, Roman forces under Lucius Flavius Silva constructed an enormous ramp against a desert fortress that seemed untouchable. The siege was relentless, methodical, patient. Rome did not rely on desperation. They relied on inevitability. Stone by stone, they reshaped the landscape itself until the fortress became vulnerable. Roman artillery amplified this terror. Ballistae and onagers hurled projectiles with mechanical precision, turning fortified cities into targets from a distance. Siege towers rolled forward like wooden giants. The psychological effect was devastating. Many cities surrendered before full assault, knowing resistance would mean annihilation. Yet perhaps the most unsettling aspect of Roman tactics was their use of intelligence and deception. Rome gathered information obsessively. Scouts mapped terrain. Local alliances were cultivated strategically. Enemies were studied, their fighting styles dissected. Roman commanders did not underestimate opponents. They profiled them. During the campaigns against Carthage, Rome faced the legendary Hannibal, a tactician whose victories stunned the Republic. At Cannae, Roman forces suffered catastrophic losses. The defeat was horrifying. Entire generations of soldiers perished in a single day. Many states would have collapsed under such trauma. Rome responded differently. Instead of surrendering, they recalibrated. They avoided direct confrontation, adopted Fabian strategies of attrition, and exploited Carthage's logistical limitations. Rome learned from defeat with ruthless clarity. This capacity to absorb disaster without disintegration made Rome uniquely resilient. Other powers tied morale to victory. Rome tied survival to adaptation. Senators debated strategy not with emotion, but with cold arithmetic. They calculated manpower reserves, economic strain, and political stability. War was not passion, it was policy. Roman camps, constructed daily, further illustrate their obsessive preparation. Even during active campaigns, the layout remained standardized. Streets aligned in grid patterns. Command tents occupied central positions. Defensive ditches and ramparts enclosed the perimeter. Every soldier knew his position instinctively. In darkness, amid confusion, the camp structure offered stability. An army that sleeps inside fortifications each night rarely wakes in panic. Then there was psychological manipulation. Rome cultivated an image of invincibility. Triumphs in the capital displayed captured kings in chains. Public rituals transformed military success into collective myth. Enemies understood that defeat meant humiliation, enslavement, or extinction. Rome weaponized reputation, but fear was not reserved solely for outsiders. Roman discipline enforced cohesion internally. Commanders could impose harsh penalties, but they also rewarded loyalty with land grants and citizenship. Soldiers fought not only for survival, but for status. Military service became a ladder of social mobility. The brilliance of Rome lay in integration. Roads fed legions. Legions protected roads. Engineering amplified fear. Fear discouraged rebellion. Intelligence informed strategy. Strategy preserved expansion. It was a self-sustaining cycle, calculated and relentless. By the 1st century CE, the Roman military machine was not merely an army marching across maps. It was a system that reshaped economies, landscapes, and identities. Entire cultures were absorbed into its framework. Resistance became isolated sparks, extinguished by coordinated response. Yet beneath this aura of inevitability lingered a deeper secret. Rome's greatest weapon was not steel, nor stone, nor discipline alone. It was time. Rome understood that wars were rarely decided in single clashes. They were decided through endurance, patience, and the capacity to outlast. And in the next chapter, we enter the mind of the Roman battlefield itself, where formations shifted like living geometry and chaos was sculpted into victory. Stand in the center of an ancient battlefield and imagine the noise, screams, clashing metal, the thud of bodies colliding in dust and blood. Most armies dissolved into chaos within minutes. Lines bent, gaps opened, panic spread faster than flame. But when Roman legions entered that chaos, something unnatural happened. The noise did not vanish. It reorganized. Roman tactics were not built on heroic charges or reckless bravery. They were built on geometry. Distance between soldiers was calculated. Rotations were rehearsed. Relief lines waited with silent precision. The battlefield became a shifting grid rather than a frenzied swarm. And within that grid, fear could not spread easily. The manipular system of the early republic had already introduced flexibility unknown to rigid phalanxes. Later, the cohort system refined this adaptability. Units could detach, reinforce, pivot. When pressured on one flank, reserves moved like sliding pieces on a board. To an observer above, Roman formations resembled deliberate design rather than desperate reaction. One of the most chilling aspects of Roman combat was rotation. Frontline soldiers did not fight to exhaustion. At command, they withdrew through gaps in the line while fresh troops advanced. The enemy, facing what seemed like an endless wall of shields, gradually lost stamina. Roman soldiers, shield-locked and short-sword ready, struck in controlled thrusts rather than wild swings. Efficiency replaced fury. The gladius, short and lethal, was designed for stabbing at close range. Roman training emphasized targeting the abdomen and groin, maximizing lethality with minimal movement. It was brutal, intimate warfare. Shields absorbed impact, formations held, and discipline ensured no one broke ranks in pursuit of glory. Individual heroics were discouraged. Cohesion was sacred. When missile fire threatened, the testudo formation emerged like a living fortress. Shields interlocked overhead and along the sides, transforming infantry into an armored shell. Advancing slowly beneath arrows and stones, they embodied the terrifying patience that defined Roman warfare. Enemies who relied on ranged attacks often watched in disbelief as their volleys lost impact. But Rome's brilliance was not limited to infantry. Auxiliary forces extended tactical range. Cavalry recruited from allied territories provided mobility. Archers from the east added precision. Slingers from the Balearic Islands delivered devastating projectiles. Rome absorbed the strengths of conquered peoples and integrated them into its system. Conquest fed innovation. At times, Roman commanders embraced deception with theatrical precision. During the Second Punic War, lessons learned from Hannibal reshaped Roman thinking. They studied encirclement tactics, ambush vulnerabilities, terrain manipulation. Rather than clinging to pride, Rome institutionalized humility in the face of defeat. The army that once suffered catastrophic losses evolved into one that minimized exposure to similar traps. In Germania, legions under Publius Quinctilius Varus were annihilated in the Teutoburg forest. It was a disaster that shook the empire. 3 legions vanished in wooded terrain against guerrilla tactics. The psychological impact was immense. Yet even here, Rome adapted. Future campaigns in hostile forests prioritized reconnaissance, fortified marching columns, and cautious engagement. Mistakes were dissected, not buried. There was also the terrifying efficiency of Roman command communication. Standards and signals coordinated movement across vast formations. Horn calls directed shifts in formation. Orders traveled quickly because drills had ingrained responses into muscle memory. When confusion threatened, Structure restored clarity. Roman battle doctrine valued depth. Lines were rarely single layers. Multiple ranks ensured sustained pressure. Even if front ranks fell, the structure endured. This depth created psychological weight. Opponents facing a Roman legion sensed mass, endurance, and unyielding force behind every shield. Yet perhaps the most unsettling truth lies in Rome's emotional discipline. Roman soldiers were trained to suppress individual panic. Fear was acknowledged but contained within ritual, hierarchy, and shared identity. They believed they represented not merely themselves, but the eternal city. This ideological anchor fortified morale beyond physical conditioning. Victory for Rome was rarely spectacular in a cinematic sense. It was grinding, relentless, predictable. Battles became exercises in controlled pressure until the enemy fractured. Once cracks appeared, Roman forces exploited them with calculated aggression. Cavalry pursued fleeing troops to prevent regrouping. Mercy was strategic, not sentimental. The Roman battlefield was therefore less about chaos and more about compression. Pressure applied evenly, patiently, methodically. Each clash refined doctrine. Each campaign strengthened institutional memory. War became data long before the word existed. By mastering formation dynamics, rotation discipline, integrated auxiliaries, and adaptive learning, Rome transformed battle into something almost clinical. They removed randomness wherever possible. They replaced impulse with repetition. They engineered predictability in a world defined by uncertainty. And yet, even as Rome perfected its war machine, a shadow loomed beneath its triumphs. For every system built to dominate the external world, there were vulnerabilities growing within. In the final part, we confront the paradox. How could a civilization so tactically brilliant eventually falter? And what hidden flaw lay inside the unstoppable machine? By the height of its power, Rome did not merely conquer territory, it conquered imagination. From the windswept edges of Britannia to the burning sands of Syria, the Roman legion symbolized inevitability. Cities surrendered at the rumor of its approach. Kings negotiated rather than risk annihilation. Roads stitched continents together. Fortresses crowned mountains. The empire appeared eternal. But every machine, no matter how perfectly engineered, carries stress fractures hidden beneath its surface. The same system that made Rome unstoppable also made it dependent on constant expansion. Conquest fueled wealth. Wealth paid soldiers. Soldiers secured borders. Borders required more soldiers. It was a cycle that demanded momentum. When expansion slowed, pressure accumulated internally. Rome's military brilliance relied on discipline, loyalty, and centralized authority. Yet as centuries passed, political instability began to corrode the command structure that once functioned like clockwork. Generals commanded immense loyalty from their legions, sometimes more than the Senate or emperor. Civil wars erupted not because Rome lacked tactical skill, but because its tactics were turned inward. The legions that once stood united against foreign enemies now marched against each other. Battle-hardened veterans applied the same precision and formation discipline to internal conflicts. The geometry of death, once projected outward, began fracturing the empire itself. External threats also evolved. Along the Rhine and Danube frontiers, confederations of Germanic tribes studied Roman methods. In the east, the Sasanian Empire matched Rome in organization and strategic depth. Rome could still win battles, but victory required greater expenditure of resources. Logistics stretched thin across vast frontiers. There was another subtle shift. The professional army that had once guaranteed efficiency became increasingly expensive to maintain. Economic strain forced compromises. Recruitment standards fluctuated. Reliance on federated troops and mercenaries grew. Integration remained a Roman strength, but cohesion weakened when loyalty became transactional rather than ideological. Psychological dominance, once Rome's greatest weapon, began to erode. When invaders breached cities once thought impregnable, myth dissolved into vulnerability. The sack of Rome in 410 CE by the Visigoths shocked the ancient world. The city that had humiliated kings now tasted humiliation itself. Yet it would be simplistic to declare that Rome fell because its tactics failed. On the contrary, Roman military doctrine influenced warfare for centuries afterward. Byzantine armies inherited strategic sophistication. Medieval fortification design echoed Roman engineering principles. Even modern military organization reflects modular command structures refined by Rome. The deeper lesson lies not in collapse, but in transformation. Rome was unstoppable for centuries because it fused adaptability with discipline. It treated warfare as a science long before formal military academies existed. It institutionalized learning from defeat. It built infrastructure that multiplied force. It integrated conquered strengths rather than dismissing them. It understood morale as both weapon and shield. But Rome also demonstrates a haunting paradox. The systems that guarantee dominance can harden into rigidity. Expansion can become addiction. Professional armies can outgrow the political structures meant to control them. Fear can inspire obedience, but it can also breed resentment. When we study the secret military tactics that made Rome unstoppable, we are not merely examining shield formations or siege ramps. We are witnessing the birth of systemic warfare, a civilization that turned preparation into ritual, geometry into survival, and patience into conquest. On ancient battlefields, when the dust rose and the legions advanced in perfect alignment, enemies faced more than soldiers. They faced an idea that chaos could be mastered, that discipline could overpower numbers, that engineering could reshape nature, that adaptability could defeat even genius adversaries. For centuries, that idea prevailed. And perhaps that is Rome's most enduring secret. Not that it was invincible, but that it understood something timeless about power. Victory does not belong to the strongest alone. It belongs to those who prepare relentlessly, adapt without pride, and endure longer than their rivals. The Roman eagle no longer casts its shadow across continents. Its roads still lie buried beneath modern highways. Its fortresses crumble under quiet skies. But the echo of synchronized footsteps, steady and unyielding, still reverberates through military doctrine today. Rome was unstoppable, not because it never bled. It was unstoppable because it learned how to bleed without breaking.